So the list of kamatan, of meditation objects, numbered in 40 objects. This group of 40 is not a list given by the Buddha himself, but it was gleaned from various places in the suttas and became basis for commentarial tradition in Theravada. And of those 40, one group within the 40 are called the Anusati meditations, and those are recollection meditation. So one way we can look at meditation techniques is as being meditation techniques that use thinking as a tool, and those which don't. So obviously Anapanasati is a non-thinking meditation. You don't have to use your thinking skills, your thinking process at all. But there are other meditations where you start off by thinking on a topic. So rather than a physical sensation or a theme, one particular word like Buddho, you're using a particular theme. And so it's a little bit more easy way in, I would say, for someone who's very cerebral, who likes to think a lot and finds that putting all thinking down from the first breath as being difficult and bringing up a lot of resistance. So with a thinking meditation, then you have to think systematically. It's not just allowing your mind to range here and there. So it's a meditation, I think, to be effective. It's good to do some homework first. For instance, the death meditation is a good example of that, and there are a number of points for contemplation of death. I think they're not. There's one topic which not so clearly defined as points of reference in Theravada, but there are very good lists of reflections to develop Maranasati in the Tibetan tradition. But they're all out there. But so you can, for example, sit and just go through them yourself. Everybody has to die. Nobody knows. So you can just think, what are the implications of that? Everybody has to die. Everybody who's ever been born has died or will die. Nobody knows when they're going to die. You don't know how much longer you've got. And you don't know how you're going to die. So you know you're definitely going to die, but where, when, how, you don't know. So the implications of that, and you can go into it in more detail perhaps, that, or go into different age groups, even babies die, small children die, adolescents die, men and women in their 20s die. And so you can elaborate on the basic topics that you may have learned, point 1, point 2, point 3, point 4, point 5. But when you have a discursive meditation like this, point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and maybe with sub-points A, B, C, D, something like this, then you memorize that. So that's your guide and not let you don't get lost when you're doing this kind of meditation. But there are two or three different ways of going through these points. So one is to go through point 1, and then when you run out of things in point 1, you go into point 2, and you run out of things in point 2, and point 3, point 4, point 5. And then if you're going to carry on with that discursive mode, then you go 4, 3, 2, 1. So you've got an anuloma, patiloma, just like with the 5 body parts of hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, and skin. Another way to do it is you're contemplating point 2, point 1, and then you go back, then you go to point 2, and then you come back to point 1 again. And you can alternate between point 1 and point 2 until then you're ready to go on to point 3. So the details of how you actually go about this, you can find out for yourself what works best for you, and it will depend on the particular kind of meditation. So of the 10 anusati, so that was just talking about marananusati, or maranasati is often called. Then one of the first 3 are buddhanusati, dhammanusati, and sankhanusati. So to have a good meditation and on, for example, sankhanusati, then first strategy would be to go through the words in the Pali chanting, Supatipano, Ujupatipano, Nyaya Patipano, and go through each one and just contemplate that word. The second, and this is more of a kind of an ongoing part of practice, is reading about the great Savakas, and both right from the time of the Buddha through the past 2,500 years and up until the present day with great teachers like Ajahn Jayasaro. So you have a whole kind of fund of stories and anecdotes and inspiring, uplifting teachings that can empower this sankhanusati and make it very powerful kind of meditation. Now, with these discursive meditations, when you're using the thinking mind, there will come a point where, just as with the counting of the breath or the reciting of the mantra, Buddho, for example, there's just a sense, yeah, it's enough. It's like if you've been asleep and you wake up, yeah, it's enough sleep. Or you've had your lunch and that's enough food for now. Just that sense of, yeah, that's enough. And then you can go into the non-discursive meditation, such as the breathing. And as I say, if your life is bound up with a lot of thinking and you're very invested in thinking and using, this may well be a way into non-thinking that's more suited to you than sort of jumping in the deep end with anapanasati, just to do some preliminary discursive meditation. In fact, Ajahn Chah used to recommend to go through the 32 parts of the body or the 5 parts of the body at the beginning of a session of meditation as a way of just calming the mind down and using that discursive energy in a way that is leading into the Dhamma and helping with the practice. So, all of this is in the nature of a prologue to the reading today. So I'm going to be reading this. I read this in a retreat, one of the first English retreats 10 years ago in Chiang Mai, from the biography of Venerable Sariputa. So just from this book, a wonderful book, recommend to anybody, called Great Disciples of the Buddha, written with chapters by Nyanaponika Thera and Helmut Hecker. So I'm going to skip a couple of paragraphs and start with few religious teachers have been so well served by their immediate disciples as was the Buddha. The Venerable Sariputa was second only to the Buddha in the depth and range of his understanding and in his ability to teach the doctrine of deliverance. I'm going to digress already here. One of kind of more some of the differences of opinion between different sects and schools of Buddhism are very uninteresting. But one I do find interesting and is central to history of Buddha Dhamma is the nature and role of the Buddha and what differences are there between a Buddha and a Sāvaka, or a Buddha and another enlightened person. And there are passages in the sutta where one that I remember particularly where the Buddha is speaking with Mahakassapa, and Mahakassapa had nearly all of the powers of a Buddha. Is incredibly endowed with almost every kind of knowledge and psychic power and so on and so forth. And the Buddha himself, if you remember, is an arahant. You say, arahang sama. So he's the arahant and he's the Buddha. So what is the difference? And it's not really you might think such a huge difference in Theravada point of view, is that he was the one who discovered the path or rediscovered the path. He was the one that taught the path. So so it's more not in the sense of how he is or what he is in the present moment as to how he got there is a significant difference. But for me, the key one here, which is what I want to mention, is that arahants retain a lot of personality traits from when they were unenlightened. Particularly any kind of personality trait which is not, of course, rooted in greed, hatred, and delusion. So it might be someone who's very outgoing, or an extrovert, or an introvert. So an introvert doesn't, he becomes an introvert arahant. An extrovert becomes an extrovert arahant. They retain a lot of their original personalities, and so not all arahants are like charismatic. Ajahn Chah was incredibly charismatic, but that wasn't a function of his enlightenment. And I found this for myself when I was first gathering information for the Thai biography, which was in the late 1980s and mid 1980s, and speaking to his elder brother. And his elder brother was incredibly charismatic, and you see so much of Ajahn Chah and his elder brother. And I realized a lot of things that, as Westerners, we thought, this was kind of the genius, the uniqueness of Ajahn Chah. In fact, a lot of it was quite people around him and his family and his culture. They wouldn't have been so amazed by that. He was charismatic, and you go down to the kitchen on a one prat day, and his brother's sitting there sort of telling stories and everything. It was just like Ajahn Chah sitting telling stories to all the monks. These kinds of things are not indicative of enlightenment, and you can have articulate arahants and inarticulate arahants who find it very difficult to give Dhamma talks of any kind. So the point making here is the arahant retains personality and habits and things which were not rooted in greed, hatred, and delusion. And new habits arise which are rooted in wisdom and compassion and so on. Ajahn Chah's simile here is of different species of birds. So you can have big birds and small birds and bright-colored birds and dull-colored birds, birds that sing beautifully and birds that sing don't, but they're all recognizably birds. And he would say this is like arahants, so they're all different kinds, and grumpy ones and joyful ones, and it's a sort of the enlightened version of the Seven Dwarfs with Snow White. Yeah. But the Buddha was not like that. He lost. This is my understanding, that was something that disappeared when he became a Buddha. It wasn't still I think maybe you could argue that in his use of language and his the ability to create beautiful poetry spontaneously, and you could say that's a function of his very elite education that he had in the palace, his love of wordplay and all these things. But his personality, it was Buddha. He's not an enlightened human being that top level we call a Buddha. No, he's something else, which is why when somebody asked him, what are you? Are you a god? Are you just totally blown away? And he said, are you a human being? And he said, no. So the Buddha's not just a very wise human being. The Buddha, it's a different category altogether. He's no longer in that human being category. He has a human body, which gets old and sick and dies, but he's a Buddha. So the Buddha is a Buddha, and he's not recognizably human in the way that the Savakas are. So this is the whole point I'm making. The Venerable Sariputa was Arahant, second only in wisdom, and so on and so forth. But he had certain kind of lovable human characteristics, and which is shown in all kinds of ways, his relationship to his students, and particularly in his friendship with Venerable Mahamoggallana. So I think many of you know that I've last year or two I've been writing a screenplay for a TV series, and the second and third episodes feature Venerable Sariputa quite prominently, and these stories about his life are woven into the story. Okay, so in the Tripitaka, there is no connected account of Venerable Sariputa's life, but it can be pieced together from the various incidents scattered throughout the canonical texts and commentaries in which he figures. Some of them are more than incidents, for his life is so closely interwoven with the life and ministry of the Buddha that he plays an essential part in it. And on a number of occasions, it is Sariputta himself who takes the leading role as skilled preceptor and exemplar, as kind and considerate friend, as guardian of the welfare of the bhikkhus under his charge, as faithful repository of his master's doctrine, the function which earned him the title of Dhamma Senapati, the marshal of the Dhamma. And always as himself, a man unique in his patience and steadfastness, modest and upright in thought, word, and deed, a man to whom one act of kindness was a thing to be remembered with gratitude so long as life endured. Even among the Arahants, those freed from all defilements of passion and delusion, he shone like the full moon in a starry sky. This then is the man of profound intellect and sublime nature, a true disciple of the great teacher, whose story we have set down to the best of our ability in the pages that follow. If you, the reader, can gather from this imperfect record something of the qualities of a perfected human being, fully liberated and raised to the highest level of realization, and of how such a person acts and speaks and comports himself towards his fellows, and if the reading of it gives you strength and faith in the assurance of what a human being may become, then our work has been worthwhile and is fully rewarded. So we begin with early life and two villages, Upatissa and Kolita, which are not far from the city of Rajagaha. So Rajagaha is in Magadha, which is more or less north of Bodh Gaya. So if you, from Bodh Gaya going northwards to Rajagaha, it's about 80, 90 kilometers, something like that. And Sariputa and his best friend, who we now call Moggallana, were born in villages close by. So before our Buddha had appeared in the world, a Brahmin woman named Rupasari, living in Upatissa village, conceived, and so too on the same day at Kolita village did another Brahmin woman whose name was Mogali. The two families were closely connected, having been friends with one another for 7 generations. From the first day of their pregnancy, the families gave due care to the mothers-to-be, and after 10 months, both women gave birth to boys on the same day. So 10 months in the probably Indian system, so you start, if you go over 9 months, it becomes 10 months. So it's like it's not 9 months and a few days, it's counted as 10 months. On the name-giving day, Rupasari's child received the name Upatissa, as he was a son of the foremost village of that family of that village, and for the same reason, Mogali's son was named Kolita. And they grew up together and acquired mastery of the sciences. Now, at Rajagaha, there was an annual event called the Hilltop Festival, and seats were arranged for both youths, and they sat together to witness the celebrations. When there was an occasion for laughter, they laughed. When the spectacle was excited, they became excited, and they paid their fees for the extra shows. In this manner, they enjoyed the festival for a second day. On the third day, however, strange thoughts cast their shadows across their hearts, and they could no longer laugh or share in excitement. As they sat there watching the plays and dances, for just a moment, the spectre of human mortality revealed itself to their inner vision, and once they'd caught a glimpse of it, in their attitude could never be the same again. For each, this somber mood gradually crystallized into a compelling question: what is there to look at here? Before these people have reached 100 years, they will all be dead. Shouldn't we go seek a teaching of deliverance? So the story here is shows this close link with Venerable between Sariputa and Moggallana since before they were born, and the moment in their youth when something crystallized. And this is a common feature for so many people who leave the world, just this in the midst of excitement and things that always seemed normal and obvious and inevitable in life, and it's just suddenly it's like, well, this is so trite and meaningless and hollow. So that the movement towards a teaching of liberation in the beings of more, having that kind of barami, is not, getting their heart broken by a girlfriend or a boyfriend or some extreme experience or tragedy. It may be that, but quite often it's something much more subtle. It's just suddenly looking around is with fresh eyes, and something that seems so kind of meaningful become meaningless. I certainly don't want to compare myself with this great beings, but to tell you some of my own experience, I'm someone who because I have this, I think I told you before, this condition called aphantasia, where I don't have any images in my mind, so it means that I rarely dream. But I did have this dream where I was walking through a forest, and I came to a little house or a log cabin, something like that. And I walked in, and there were all these beautiful wooden carvings and instruments and everything very delicate and beautiful. And I walked, and I started to pick, and everything I picked up, it had been eaten by termites, and it just went to dust in my hand. Every single thing that I touched, however beautiful and meaningful, it just turned into dust. So that was example, just an ordinary monk like me. This is some kind of thought and concept and image, and so it just became suddenly very, very real to me in that way. Thoughts and feelings and things that had been accumulating in my mind about the emptiness and the hollowness of ordinary life. So for well, now we're up on a much higher level. Okay, we're with Sariputa now, and he and his friend are in this great annual event, and right in the middle of it, when they should be having a really good time, they say, "What are we looking at? Everyone here is going to be dead in a few years. What's the point of it all?" It was with such thoughts in mind that on this third day they sat through the festival, and Kolita noticed that his friend seemed pensive and withdrawn. He says, "What's the matter, my dear Upatissa? You don't seem so happy and joyous today. You're troubled about something. Tell me what's on your mind." And Upatissa, which is Sariputta to be, says, "My dear Kolita, I've been thinking there's no benefit at all for us in enjoying these hollow shows. We're wasting our time here. What I want to do is to seek a path to deliverance from the entire round of rebirth. But you too, Kolita, seem to be discontented." Kolita says, "Yeah, I'm thinking exactly the same thing." And so they decide to leave the home life and seek for deliverance together. So remember, this is before the Buddha's enlightenment. So at that time, there lived at Rajagaha a wandering ascetic, a sadhu, a paribhajika, called Sanjay, who had a great following of pupils. Deciding to take ordination under him, Upatissa and Kolita approached him, and each of them had, they say, a following of 500 Brahmin youths. So 500 means a lot. Okay, it doesn't mean one more than 499. It means it's a Pali idiom. Okay, it means a lot. And all of them received ordination from Sanjaya. And from the time of their ordination under him, Sanjaya's reputation and support increased abundantly. So within a short time, two friends had learned Sanjaya's entire doctrine, and they're a bit disappointed. Said, it must be kind of awkward for them. They said, "Master, is this it? Is there something else, some kind of esoteric teaching?" And Sanjaya said, "I'm afraid not. That's it. You know the whole thing." And so they thought, well, we're wasting our time here. But India is vast, and if we wander through village, towns, and cities, I'm sure we can find a true master. And so whenever they heard about wise ascetics or Brahmins, they went to meet them and learn their doctrines, but none of them were able to satisfy their question and to answer their questions. So having traveled through the whole of India, they returned to Rajagaha, and they decide to split up for a while. But whenever either of them should find the deathless, then they agreed they would inform the other one. So this was their kind of pact of brotherhood. And sometime after they'd made that agreement, the Blessed One, the Buddha, set out for Rajagaha. And he'd shortly before this completed the first rainy season retreat following his enlightenment. And now the time had arrived for wandering and preaching. Before his enlightenment, he had promised King Bimbisara that he would return to Rajagaha after attaining his goal, and now he set forth to fulfill that purpose. So in stages, the Blessed One journeyed from Gaya to Rajagaha, and having received from King Bimbisara the Bamboo Grove Monastery, Beluwana, he took up residence there. And among the first 61 Arahants, whom the Buddha had sent forth to proclaim the message of deliverance to the world, was an elder named Assaji. So Assaji had been, if you remember, one of the group of 5 ascetics who had attended upon the Bodhisattva while he was engaged in his ascetic practices, and he was also one of the first 5 disciples. Now, one morning when Assaji was walking on alms round in Rajagaha, Upatissa saw him calmly wending his way from door to door with his bowl in hand, and he was struck by Assaji's dignified and serene appearance. And Upatissa thought, never before have I seen such a monk. He must be one of those who are Arahants, who are on the way to Arahantship. Should I not approach him and question him? But then he considered, it's not the proper time now for putting questions to this monk, as he is going for alms through the streets. I'd better follow behind him after the manner of supplicants. And he did so. This encounter between Assaji, Venerable Assaji, the Arahant, and Sariputa, who was still called Upatissa at this time, was one of Ajahn Chah's favorite stories. He would tell us again and again, and particularly when he's impressing on the monks the value of the Vinaya, and what inspired somebody who had so much parami and so much spiritual strength inside him. What inspired him to begin with was just seeing this simple monk, elderly monk, on Bindabat, on alms round, and he had that sensitivity that he said that his dignified and serene appearance. He said, never before have I seen such a monk. I must approach him. So Ajahn Chah, Luang Por Chah would say, you don't have to necessarily give Dhamma talks, but you keep the Vinaya, you keep all the core what, and then this is how a monk spreads the Dhamma through their conduct, through their deportment. And so this, I remember Luang Por Chah telling this story so many times. So when the elder had finished his alms round and was seeking a quiet place to eat his meal, Upatissa spread out his own sitting cloth and offered the seat to the elder. The elder Assaji sat down and took his meal, after which Upatissa served him with water from his own water container, and in this way performed towards Assaji the duties of a pupil to a teacher. See, it's so beautiful. He's not just saying, okay, you seem like you know what you're talking about. What's your teaching? No, I've been approached in that manner. So he waits very patiently while the elder finishes his alms round, and then he's looking for a quiet place to eat. So Venerable Sariputa spreads out a cloth, please sit down. It's not mentioned here, but he may well have washed his feet for him and prepared water and so on. And after Assaji took his meal, Tissa would have washed his hands and then offered him drinking water, performed the duties of a pupil to a teacher, showing that he is humble and he's ready to receive the Dhamma. And after they exchanged the usual courteous greetings, Upatissa said, "Serene are your features, friend. Pure and bright is your complexion. Under whom have you gone forth as an ascetic? Who is your teacher, and whose doctrine do you profess?" And Assaji replied, "There is, friend, a great recluse, a scion of the Sakyas, who has gone forth from the Sakya clan. I have gone forth under him, the Blessed One. That Blessed One is my teacher, and it is his Dhamma that I profess. But what does the Venerable One's master teach? What does he proclaim?" And questioned thus, the elder Assaji thought to himself, "These wandering ascetics are opposed to the Buddha's teaching. I shall show him how profound this teaching is." So he said, "I am but new to the training, friend. It is not long since I went forth from home, and I came but recently to this doctrine and discipline. I cannot explain it in detail to you." And Sariputta says, "I am called Upatissa, friend. Please tell me according to your ability, be it much or little. It will be my task to penetrate its meaning by way of 100 or 1,000 methods." And he added, "Be it little or much that you can tell, the meaning only, please proclaim to me. To know the meaning is my sole desire. Of no use to me are many words." And in response, the elder Assaji uttered this stanza, "Of those things that arise from the cause, the Tathagata has told the cause, and also what their cessation is. This is the doctrine of the great recluse." And upon hearing the first two lines, there arose in the wanderer Upatissa the dust-free, stainless vision of the Dhamma, the first glimpse of the deathless, the path of stream entry. And to the ending of the last two lines, he already listened as a stream enterer.